Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome TMH Senior Manager of Advanced Services and Digital Solutions, Nick Ostergaard.
Good morning. It's a long walk, so we're back in the octagon. You guys didn't beat me up too bad yesterday, so came back for day two. So welcome back to Toyota Week. I'm looking forward to another great day of learning, and I'm excited for our event at Victory Field across the street later tonight. So I got some good news for all of you. You won't have to listen to me talk about digital transformation and changing business environments for the next 45 minutes. The better news is you get to hear about all of that stuff and more from one of the world's leading authorities on B2B commerce and strategy, Andy Hoar. Andy has spent his career in the B2B space working with Fortune 100 companies and leading mid-market B2B manufacturers, dealers, and distributors. Andy has become an expert in business transformations, particularly being on the leading edge when it comes to commerce and selling. You can find Andy and his master B2B partners on LinkedIn every Friday for short 15-minute candid discussions on hard-hitting topics in the B2B space, as well as find tons of published content from his career at Forrester Research. Andy started off in Silicon Valley and has his own battle scars and lessons learned, as well as some secrets for success. I've known Andy for a few years and have valued his experiences and guidance, and I'm excited to be able to share that with all of you today. At the end of Andy's session, we'll have a few minutes for some Q&A, so please don't be shy. With that, Andy, please join me on the stage, and let's give Andy a warm welcome to Toyota Week.
By the way, I swear Nick and I did not coordinate outfits, but we realized backstage we're wearing like the same shirt and the same top. Anyway. And what I'd like to do in the next, we got 35 minutes, is, as Nick mentioned in the intro, I'm going to walk you through what I think about B2B commerce. So I spent a lot of time thinking about B2B commerce. I've been doing this for 15 years. Prior to starting my own firm, I worked at a company called Forrester, where I ran the B2B commerce practice. I did that for 6 years. So I'm pretty deeply immersed in this. And I've seen, even since I started doing this, a real transformation in the space. And when Nick and I talked, he's like, yeah, I think you need to share that with the folks here, because you guys are living in this world now, and you're probably getting hit from every angle with some of this stuff and wondering, is this real? Should I be worried about this? Where's this going? So that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today. So it's really three points. Why is B2B commerce what it means, and is it really a threat? I mean, there are a lot of people who think, hey, this is going to take my job away from me, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to walk through that. I do want to talk a little bit about, too, I think a very interesting part of B2B commerce, which is the replacement parts space, and touch a little bit on telematics. Now, there are a lot of people in this audience who know a lot more about telematics than I do, but I've worked with companies that are actually using the data from telematics to really change how they operate, and we'll talk a little bit about that, too. And then I want to close by showing you some of the stuff that I think is particularly interesting and maybe a little bit over the horizon that is actually here today, and you're starting to see implementations of it, which is coming to a city near you soon. Okay, just before we get started, I wanted to mention something that Nick talked about. So we have basically two businesses. One is called Paradigm B2B, which is my consulting and speech-making arm. And then I'm also a co-founder in an organization called Master B2B, which is a network of 45,000 B2B e-commerce professionals around the world, 35,000 people on LinkedIn, and we have a private community of 500 people, of which actually Nick is a member, so I highlighted that there. That's him up in the corner. This is just a random sampling, but these are folks who we've got the people who run e-commerce at Grainger and Fastenal and 3M, Toyota, et cetera. There's a lot of folks in here. And so there's going to be opportunity at the end for me to talk a little bit about you joining this community if you want. What's great about it is it's totally free, and it's free of people trying to sell you things as well. And it's a place where you can post a question and get an answer from a peer at another company. Not a competitor, but another company. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so about B2B e-commerce. I always say there are basically three things that e-commerce brings to B2B. One is it lowers the cost to serve. This one's been studied by me and several other people for many years, and there's just a litany of examples of this. I'll highlight just a few here. Some are B2C, some are B2B. So Coke did this, for example, and they automated basically their entire partner network, because there's a lot of places that sell Coke. If you know, little mom and pop stores, and they have a little a refrigerator, and how do they keep this stuff stocked? They used to have to send people there to do this. And so what they did was they said, for those smaller people and what's called the long tail, which is the smaller dealers, the smaller customers, they said, we're going to make it possible for you to order these on your own, as opposed to having somebody go there and take the order, which is expensive, and making it more expensive for the people who were buying the Coke, too, by the way. They saw an 85% decrease in the cost to serve those clients. Levi's did something very similar in Europe. You can imagine, for those of you who have been to Europe, you know that every store seems to have a pair of Levi's and a pair of Nike shoes. I mean, somebody has to kind of supply them. Same story there. They were able to kind of roll up that long tail and make it work. And what we heard repeatedly in research is that they were seeing their margins increase by as much as 20%, and in some cases, people were reducing call center staff by as much as 50%. Now, this is before the automation of call center and before the AI part of call center, which we'll get to here in a moment. But already e-commerce was enabling people to answer questions themselves, which, by the way, they find a lot more convenient, as I'm sure you know. It's not just less of a hassle factor by making a phone call, but just at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't want to sit on the phone with somebody. I can just go to the website, type in a search, and get an answer, and take a lot of that off of somebody's plate. How many people here use FedEx, by the way? Have ever used? Yeah, right. We all use FedEx. Well, I worked at FedEx for a summer in graduate school, and they said the number one thing on their website, bar none, everybody uses it, it's the vast majority of the traffic, is the box where they say, find my package. And they had hundreds of people in call centers around the world were answering phones about where packages were. And they put this on their website, and that reduced the call volume dramatically and made for happier customers. The second thing is higher incremental revenue. And there's a whole bunch of dimensions to this. I wish we had 3 hours to go through it. We can't. But suffice to say that when companies transition from being perfectly offline to, it's always a hybrid of offline and online. It's never purely online. Companies like US Foods, the large food distributor, they saw a 5% increase in incremental spend immediately, which is just people going to the website, buying their cups and their steaks or whatever for their restaurant, and seeing an offer there for, oh, wait a minute, I can get this too? I didn't even think about that. And thank you for the reminder. And they would add that to cart. This is automatic. When I talk to people about B2B e-commerce, I say one thing right away. Just put up recommendations. Do it right, but just put up recommendations, because you'll see a very inexpensive, as in almost nothing, bump in your revenue. And then I want to point another one out here, Rexel, which you guys probably know about Rexel. It's an electrical distributor. They rolled out e-commerce, and they studied it and found that it gave them a 5% boost in their EBIT just by doing e-commerce. They did a holdout study, and they compared it to before. And that's pretty significant when you had 5 percentage points to your EBIT just by going with e-commerce. And then, like I said earlier, customer satisfaction goes up as well. So the point of this slide is to say there's a lot here that people want and that works and has been studied over time to have produced results. A couple other interesting stats. 93% of people prefer to buy online when they've decided what to buy. So if you think about it here, it's not monolithic. E-commerce can exist and online can exist at multiple points along the journey. I always say there's kind of a pre-buy phase, a buy phase, and a post-buy phase. And then it bends around and comes back to the pre-buy again, which is why it's more of a circle than a line. But once you've decided what to buy, which is that pre-buy phase, and you're just ready to go, the last thing you want to do, and this has been borne out in the research, is have to talk to somebody. Let's be honest, especially younger generations, they just want to add it and go. And so, again, when you know what you want, 93% say, just let me add it to cart. There's also a little nuance about this, which I've always found interesting, which I know few people actually know about, is that when you put out a website, so this is Grainger's website, obviously it sends traffic and therefore money to the branch locally. Turns out, and Grainger's no exception here, when you open a store or a branch locally, it actually increases the online sales in that same geography as well. So they cross-modify one another. Everybody knows that the online drives stuff for offline, but it turns out offline actually drives stuff to online. So when companies think about this as two different worlds, guess who doesn't think about this as two different worlds? Your customers. So I mentioned this earlier about the long tail. I'm a big fan of this. A lot of companies have found this is the most difficult part of the job. The fast-moving SKUs, the key accounts, the big customers, there's a whole platform and a whole operation in place for that, and it involves a lot of people, white glove treatment, et cetera. But what about these smaller customers who are buying, onesies and twosies here and there? This is really tailor-made for e-commerce. And so I just wanted to kind of show this graphic to show that the farther you go out in the tail, the more expensive it is to support these customers. It's more pressure on your time. When you have a salesperson on the phone selling one item when they could be selling on the other end of the curve a big account with lots of items, not a great use of their time as well. So there's a balance here, and it's not as clean as it sounds. Like all the fast-moving stuff, the enterprise accounts, that's all people and no e-commerce. No. And on the other end of the tail, it's not like it's all e-commerce and no people. There's mixtures along the way depending whether you're in the pre-buy, the buy, or the post-buy phase. So those are kind of the arguments for B2B e-commerce, but as I said, the very most important reason why is actually the most obvious reason why, which is you don't have a choice. Your customers want it, especially the younger ones. Everybody in the room has kids or relatives who are young. You've probably noticed that their first instinct is not to pick up the phone and call anybody, including you probably. It doesn't happen. They live in a digital native world, a digital first world where their first option is pick up the phone and see what's there. And so you have to design all your processes around that way of thinking. So when you think about this, I encourage you to think a little bit less about yourself and more about the younger generation because, and I'll show you in a moment, the vast majority of buyers now in B2B are actually much younger than you might think. So I mentioned this community we have, and we often talk to the community and ask them questions. And one of the questions that we thought was fascinating was, again, I told you this is Grainger, Fastenal, 3M, Honeywell, Toyota, tons and tons of companies here. We said, question, are younger buyers completely changing the purchase game in B2B commerce? And we put the word completely in there for a very distinct purpose. And even I was shocked by this. It came back and said, yes, it is fundamentally different. 73% to 27%. Again, not marginally different, fundamentally different. And I'd be curious if people are actually seeing this kind of rhetorical question in their businesses, because there are younger people who are emerging here. And this is the stat that I wanted to share with you. Turns out almost 60% of the global workforce right now is under the age of 42. So we're talking 18 to 42. And every industry is different. Yours might skew a little bit older, perhaps. Maybe not. But we sometimes forget that we're the sellers in a way, and the people buying are oftentimes not the senior people in these companies. They tend to be the junior people. Their bosses might say, hey, I need you to go buy this stuff. It's more of a junior position to kind of fulfill buying, especially if you get into procurement. It's a whole other story. But they're younger. And so I think we have a tendency to think that they're like us, and we would build something that we want. But in fact, like I said earlier, it's really a younger generation, and this number is going to go up, not down. A couple of interesting things about this generation, which I want to have you guys consider here for a moment. Even some of the stuff shocks me. So 62% of people in the younger generations, Gen Z and Gen Y, will not use an app or website that's hard to navigate. Okay. 60% will not use an app or a website that's too slow to load. What does too slow to load mean? Well, check this out. So this has been studied pretty extensively as well. Turns out that for every 1 second that it takes for the website to load, the conversion rate for purchase goes down 7%. So 3 seconds, 21, 22%, keep doing the math. It only takes a matter of seconds for people to bail. And then you know what? We all do this too. We all do this. I do. I mean, I remember when Uber first came out, I'm like, 15 minutes? That's amazing. Now it's like 5 minutes? I don't have 5 minutes to wait for Uber. So we're all changing with this. And again, this is going to get faster and faster and faster. I'm not a qualitative judgment. I'm not talking about whether we should be accommodating this or not, but the reality is this is the reality. This one totally stunned me. TikTok users say watching a video for more than 1 minute is stressful. Now, there's so much in here that we could talk about, some of which is pretty embarrassing about our society and society in general, but stressful? I'm always sharing this because I want you to see and think and feel what this younger generation is going through right now. Now, think about when you're designing your website and you see things like this. This might be a little hard to read, but some research from Digital Commerce 360 said that 60% of the time people will leave basically because they can't find the product or there's insufficient information about the product. I mean, look, we all do this too. Let's not project this on just the younger generations. If I can't find something, I'm leaving. Or if the data is incomplete, I'm leaving. I mean, there's been a bunch of research done about content, like how many pictures you should have. By the way, the general theory is that between 4 and 6 pictures is the ideal number of pictures for an item, because less than that, fewer than 4, is too few in general, and more than 6 is kind of a waste. But think about that. And I'll bet that number is going up. I say kind of a waste. Now it's like there's an insatiable demand and appetite for pictures and data and everything else. So, Nick, we could come back and talk for hours about this one, about data, because this is the lurking problem. Most companies have terrible data. They designed it in a different time for a different reason, and you can't do any of this with bad data. And so we talk a lot about fixing the data. I call it the dirty data problem. And I liken it to, when you put in infrastructure, like brand new technology, talented people, it's like having a house that's state of the art with the best plumbing system in the world and you're pumping sludge through it. That's kind of what's happening with a lot of companies. So if this is a problem for you, you're not alone, but it is a problem that's going to have to be fixed. Another thing is, this is a study done by McKinsey. They asked people, what causes you to switch? What are the must-haves? And again, very consistent with what I just showed you. 81% of companies said, if I can't find the product, I'm gone. Prices, this is a very controversial topic, but whether you should show the prices, and if there's contract pricing, do you show that? Do competitors see it? What do you do? The one answer I always give to this, and it's not a fair answer, but I'm going to give it, is how many people have ever gone to Amazon and not seen a price? So when you think about, I don't want to show my price because, whatever the answer is, consider the rest of the world shows the price. Again, the good reasons not to show the exact price, but making people authenticate to see something, remember these numbers? I'm gone. If I have to wait 3 seconds, if I have to log, I have to sign up, forget it. Again, this is the nature of what people are doing. And again, this shouldn't come as a surprise because guess what? We do it too. We do it too. Inconsistent experiences is a killer. And the last one is if the orders aren't easy to place. So there's a lot of reasons to remove friction along the way. Whenever I talk to the Amazon folks, I always say, hey, what is the big innovation you guys are doing or have done? And you will be surprised to hear that, yes, they occasionally have something new like the Echo Dot or Alexa. I hope anyone's got Alexa going right now and it just went off. But there's some things like that. But for the most part, you know what they obsess about? Little things that are bumps along the way. They spend, and this is probably not a great job for an engineer, but they spend a lot of time trying to figure out by measuring where the pages are off. Do people leave at a higher rate on this page than this page? If so, fix the page. So there's a lot of just fixing pages so that people can streamline through. I mean, the other day I bought something on Amazon in 4 seconds. And because I live in this industry, I never forget these things. I mean, imagine, you can literally look at something and 4 seconds later it's on its way, and then an hour or 2 later it shows up. That's just stunning. That's stunning that it's possible. This is the mindset that people are in now. A bit more about the younger generation here. 74% of millennials and Zoomers, so Gen Y and Gen Z, that age range, 18 to 42, will avoid more sales calls and outreach. So they don't want to be contacted by salespeople. Again, we can talk some other time about whether that's the right way to go or not, because they probably make a lot of mistakes and end up having to call anyway. But just their inclination is not to do that. And what we've seen from a lot of companies we've talked to is that just 13% of B2B buyers are increasing their use of phone-based customer service, whereas 43% are increasing their use of chat-based customer service. So it's kind of shifted away. I do this myself. Maybe it's from years of being on hold and being told how important my call is and putting me there for like 10 minutes and then hanging up on me accidentally and then me calling back and saying, I'm sorry, we don't have any information about this phone call. Compare that with not having to be on the phone and sitting there with a chat and being able to do other things while I'm chatting with people. And by the way, having a record of all those things, it's become almost a superior way to operate. And younger generations have figured this out. So I want to give you an idea of how this is kind of penetrating B2B. Carrier Enterprise, people have heard of Carrier, the air conditioning people. Just about a year ago or so, they introduced a 2-hour delivery, what they call Uber-like delivery for HVAC parts. And they said the reason why is because Amazon and Walmart were delivering within 2 hours. And that was putting pressure on the mindset of people who were complaining about why can I get fill in the blank on Walmart or from Walmart or Amazon, and I have to wait all this time for you. Now, if you're strictly in a B2B space, you don't compete with the consumer side at all, then you've got a little more time, not much. But there are a lot of companies that, Walmart sells B2B stuff. And so it's not like people put the head on and say, I'm a B2C consumer here, and then take it off and put the B2B hat on. Go, okay, a blinking green screen and phone-based customer support is just great. It isn't that way. The same person who thinks and feels this way thinks and feels this way in B2B as well. You just force them to have a different experience, which they don't like. So I mentioned replacement parts. I just want to highlight a couple of the companies, even in our community, who have talked about some of the stuff they're doing. So just a quick one. This is a company in the UK that is responsible basically for all the ground transportation, the buses, the subways, et cetera. And they said by using telematics, they saved like $30-40 million. And you guys know this pretty well too. By just knowing the status of the parts and being able to preemptively reach out to them or fix things or suggest maintenance that everybody was happy about, again, this kind of information connection, which is tied into digital, can make a really big difference. Another company, it's called Normit, and they make these drillers that go underground and drill for, not oil, but they drill mines and stuff like that. It's a company in the Nordic region. For every $500,000 machine, they generate $500,000 in parts revenue over the course of the next 3 years. So is this really a product that you're buying or more of kind of a service in a way? It's challenges that telematics and stuff make it interesting where you're not buying a widget, so to speak, anymore. You might be buying a relationship with a company, which is a really different mindset, and I think a far more lucrative one and a far more permanent one, as opposed to just buying something and comparison shopping, so to speak, on even these things. It's a different world. One of my favorite examples, this has been around for a little while, was the Rolls-Royce Total Care Package. It was called Power by the Hour. And it was this idea that Rolls-Royce makes these engines for planes. And they realized that they had a better model for how to do this. They used to sell the engines. They would cost several $100,000. Boeing would buy, as one example, would buy these engines, attach them, and then say, okay, here's a maintenance contract. Here's the price. We'll see if we need you. And Rolls-Royce figured out something that they could actually, it's what's called power by the hour. What if they got paid for when the engine was in use? Then they had an aligned incentive with Boeing, for example, to make sure that these things are up and running as often as possible. And it changed their business. They started planning technicians there to make sure that the thing was up because they're not getting paid unless those engines are in use. So it really changed the mindset, and everybody was much happier with it. So again, this is kind of the mindset that you're probably starting to see now. I know when Nick and I chatted about this, there's a lot of emerging use of telematics in the forklifts and reading the data and doing something with it. Well, here's a great example of a company that's kind of ahead of the curve on this. A company called Hilti. I'm sure many of you have heard of Hilti or used Hilti. They make power tools, drills, et cetera. They have a really different model. Unlike Black & Decker or other companies, Hilti has this kind of guarantee that if our product breaks, we'll just replace it. So if you're on a job site and you're using a power drill and the needle breaks or whatever, they're like, you just contact them, increasingly, by the way, on your phone, press a button, and within 2 hours or so, they'll deliver a new one to the job site, no charge. That's really kind of a subscription to Hilti, which enabled this. This is a little hard to read, but feeding all of this data now. So I think I read someplace, it's like 57 million data items that are collecting on a daily basis from power tools. And it does it, by the way, cleverly when you charge it on the battery. So they build in recyclable batteries, and when they plug it in, it sends all that data to them. And so they've been able to recommend like advanced services, value-added services. They've recommended to some people, you're not using this as frequently as you thought. It might be more advantageous to rent it versus buy it, all from this data that they've been collecting. This is a great article that was in the Harvard Business Review about how they did it. And there are a couple of really interesting lessons learned from that. For example, and I'm sure people in this room have had this problem, they found that when they were trying to define what this data would look like, because they were getting deluged with all this data, they had 370 different ways of measuring runtime. Think about that. So somebody had to figure out, does that mean the same thing as this? And that's one piece of language. 370 different versions of this. I've heard this story, versions of this story, dozens of times from companies where they're not even quite sure what to call things. Or somebody calls it this, or they abbreviate it there, and then in the database it becomes like this hodgepodge of messy data. Again, if you don't know what runtime is, how can you make a recommendation about runtime? So there's a lot of that goes on. A lot of people, enrich that data. There's a lot of overseas operations to do this. AI is going to have a lot to do with this as well. It's pretty good at kind of figuring things out faster than humans can. Not perfect, but if it could start the process and cut it in half or 3/4, then it's worth it. The other thing is, if you're moving down this path, you want to focus on just a few cases. Everybody wants to boil the ocean here. It's a massive undertaking. If you're going to be doing something like this, focus on a few. This is what Hilti learned. They tried to do too much, and they figured out just focusing on a few kind of key use cases really mattered. And then plan time for training. They underestimated how much it was going to take to do this. Still very much worth the effort, but they said employees needed weeks of time to understand how this data was going to be used, not just a couple hours of training. But I encourage you to read the article. It's actually quite illuminating. Okay, so we got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to share some of the stuff I see that's a little bit over the horizon. No reason to be scared here, but this stuff is kind of interesting. And again, this may be coming to a theater near you fairly soon. These are just a hodgepodge of things I've selected here. This one's fascinating to me. There's a professor at Kellogg up in Northwestern, which is where I live in Evanston, who's created, and he's not the only person to have done this, but he's created a digital avatar of himself where he can write a script and it'll move his mouth for him. And that was the first thing he did. And then the second thing he did was he created a digital twin. The difference between an avatar and a twin is now the twin actually has been trained on AI and can speak on his behalf. So he's using this in a trial basis to help people understand how to do. He's an expert on project management, and he's helping people understand. So you can actually interact with his digital twin right now by asking questions. I tried it out. It's pretty impressive. It's his voice, but he's not doing anything. He's just trained it. So imagine a little over the horizon, how this is going to look for, say, customer service, et cetera. You may be talking to somebody who you think is real and not even realize they're not. And by the way, it might be one person who's been trained to speak on behalf of several people. So again, nothing to be scared about here, but just to let you know, this stuff exists now. And speaking of existing now, I tried this out myself just for fun. And so I have a little video I want to show you here. So if you guys could roll that, and I'll talk about it.
I always thought it'd be fun to speak to you in French, but of course I don't speak French. So I thought I'd have a little fun with this technology called Technologie de traduction de l'anglais au français. Peu importe ce que je fais avec mes mains, peu importe ce que je fais avec mon visage, que je sois expressif ou non, cela remplace mes lèvres par ce que je dis, et cela ressemble littéralement et sonne comme si je parlais français.
So I ran that for the length of that because I understand we have some folks who are French Canadian here. Where's that table? How's my French? Good, because I don't speak a single word of French. So again, this is stuff that I did this in like 5 minutes. I recorded something in English, and it translated into French. You can see it replaced my mouth. It's a little clunky, but not that clunky. And this will get better and better and better to the point where you won't even notice the difference. Some of you may have seen this technology. It came out a couple years ago and kind of hit popular culture. I think it was on TV a few times. It's called Proto. Has anybody heard of this? Yeah, I hadn't heard of it either, but apparently it was on some TV shows. Ellen had it on her show, I guess. I didn't know about that. But do you see the people in front of the microphone there? They're in front of a white screen. And now, when this was filmed, they had expensive camera equipment. Now you can just do it with your iPhone. You put your iPhone on a stand right in front of this with a green screen behind you or a white screen, and it projects you into a box, which is the one you see on the other side of the screen. Three-dimensional, moving around, near real time. So you can see the people move, and in the box they move. That box can be anywhere in the world. This exists today. I encourage you to go take a look at it. You can go to YouTube and just type in Proto, show me the prototype. It is fascinating. I think you're going to see this in a lot of places. So imagine, an application potentially for you is you could have somebody, a box at a remote location. And they can hear and see, by the way, the people in front of them. So they see it on the screen inside, too. So that'd be cool if I was on one of those boxes right now. And then, hey, by the way, I'm in a box. But you could have me in a box here. And one of the use cases they have is somebody presenting remotely. Or they had the box on stage and it looked like me and it was presenting. But I was at home doing this. Again, this exists today. I can't imagine how they do the bandwidth for this, but I've seen it. It works. And there's also one other thing I wanted to show you. So we talked a lot about chatbots. And I discovered this about 6 months or so ago. And I want to run this, and then I want to talk to you about what's happening. There's a little bit of a delay, and I'll explain a little bit about that. But yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and run this video. So guys, if you could go ahead and run the video for this.
Hey there.
Well, hey there. Glad to meet you. How's your day going so far?
Not so great.
Oh, no, I am sorry to hear that. What's been on your mind?
Well, I made a purchase online of paint, and the color's not right, so I don't quite know what to do.
Oh, I can imagine. That's a real bummer about the paint color not working out. How frustrating. I know. Dealing with online purchases can be such a hassle when things don't match up. Have you tried reaching out to the company yet? Maybe they can help you sort it out or do an exchange.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's the right color or not.
I see. That's a tough spot to be in. Not knowing if the color is right makes it hard to decide what to do next. Have you thought about holding up some paint swatches or samples next to it to get a better sense of how it compares? That might help you feel more confident in your decision.
That's me talking to software. And if you see over on the side, those little chart, the graph there, what that is it's reading my voice. That's why there's the slight delay. It's reading my voice and determining my emotional state. So if it said, hey, how you doing today? I'm like, nah, well, and he would go, oh, it sounds like you're a bit depressed. Is everything okay? Go play with it. It's kind of fun. It's called Hume, H-U-M-E. First thing we did when I saw this is we went and played with it, and you can try all sorts of voices and just see, you can yell and say, hey, sounds like you're a little excited. What's going on? But it's reading your voice in real time, and those little charts are doing things like the level of excitement, inspiration. It's reading your freaking voice and deciding what mental state you're in and replying to you based on what your voice is being told to it. Again, there's a little bit of a delay. When you do it in real time, it doesn't feel like much of a delay, but it takes a millisecond for it to kind of figure out where you're coming from. Okay, so combine that with some of the other technologies I've shown you, and how far is it from the point where we're going to be all using this for, again, customer service? I don't know if sales, because there's a lot of talent that you need to be able to do the right thing. And in B2B in particular, you don't want to guess wrong and get it wrong. So I think there's a longer time horizon on that. But just think about how you could use these technologies to scale your operations. They work 24/7, 365. They're very inexpensive. People, can have long conversations, which used to be the bane of any discussion, right? I don't have 20 minutes to tie up a CSR on the phone, but this, who cares? It's free. Let them talk all day long as long as they buy stuff. Who cares, right? So the last thing here I want to talk about in terms of what's coming next is there's a new term which you're going to start hearing about. We've all heard about Gen AI, with ChatGPT, something called agentic AI, which is, this is a little interesting, autonomously managing supply chain. So basically, you'll just say, I need this done, and these AI bots will figure it out and come back to you and make recommendations. Just do it. That's why it's called an agent, because it's now acting on your behalf. As opposed to making recommendations, it'll just do it. Optimizing inventory levels, handling complex logistics planning. I think we need to use, with some guidance, this kind of stuff with airline and air traffic control, where we're having planes running into each other. These are predictable things. These kinds of technologies can make recommendations, and maybe we blink lights, like in our cars that say brake or whatever, because you're about to hit somebody. Maybe they'll say, hey, don't send that plane over there because it might run into another plane. So there's a lot of this that's coming, but I just wanted to introduce you to this concept. It's one I just heard a couple of months ago. I think we're going to start hearing a lot more about it. Okay, so in conclusion, we got 3 minutes left. I just wanted to I like to go back to the future here to think, okay, is this really that different from other things we've gone through in the past? And I think there's an interesting analogy here. So this is the electric motor and the steam engine. So back in the day, plants for power, and this is the 19th century, so the Industrial Revolution, for example. You can see the picture, I don't know which side is on the right there with the one. That's a steam engine. And they used to power plants with steam. And they had to put coal in there, and they would run the steam engine, and it operated at one capacity, which was high capacity, right? And it enabled the Industrial Revolution, so it was a really fantastic piece of technology. Then they invented the electric motor, and they replaced the steam engine with the electric motor. You know what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened for like 50 years. In fact, people ripped it back out and put the steam engine back in because they didn't see any noticeable difference in productivity, et cetera. It wasn't until Henry Ford and some other people figured out, wait a minute, if we put electric motors at various points along the way, like distributed it across an assembly line, we might be able to do some interesting new things. I think we know which one won this battle because we never went back to steam. But the point of this is that it took decades for companies to realize that they had to change their processes, their thinking, their staffing. One article I read about this said that when they first rolled this out, with a steam engine, it was just quantity of people. Anybody who can move their arms, that's it, you got a job. But when it came to this, it required more specialization, more skill, and it required hiring better quality people. And so they weren't prepared to do that at all. It was just like, throw a body in there, let's make the machine work, keep cranking out the shoes, the parts, whatever. So I would say that AI, for example, is going to be like this. And this has been studied too. The companies that moved to electric motors before people who left steam did significantly better. Those are the companies that continue to exist, like General Electric and others. The other companies that did move off of steam, waited too long, they failed. But it took a long time, which is why I thought this is a great quote, and I wanted to kind of leave you with this. I love this. The thing about a revolutionary technology is that it changes everything. That's why we call it revolutionary. And changing everything takes time, imagination, and courage. I really, really believe this to be the case. So as you look across telematics, AI, just plain old e-commerce, think about how you should change the way you operate so that you're not wasting this opportunity, and you don't want to be the company that's still stuck on the steam engine when everybody else has moved to the electric motor. So on that note, I literally finished right at 0-0. That is unbelievable. Okay, so I know we have time for some questions. Nick, I think we have some people in the audience who want to ask some questions. I'll take any question. I'll try and answer it. Can't guarantee that much, but does somebody have a question? Yeah, see two. I can't see very well, so
Got one over here.
I saw, over here? Okay, yeah, you have a microphone? Yeah, great.
Good morning.
Yeah.
My name is Josh from ProLift Toyota. First of all, thank you for terrifying us this morning that the robots are coming for us. It's good to know. We can go ahead and accept that. But when you think about us as dealers, what do you think the risk is for us with technology and customer expectation? Where are we at risk as material handling dealers, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is part of what I talked about in the presentation. It's the front side. It's the customer-facing side. It's not the back end. They'll find ways to replace, the ERP system. They'll clean up the data. There'll be new technologies that'll make it easier for you to do your job. The area that I worry about the most is when companies are out of sync and out of line with their customers. So that younger generation's not going to sit there and wait for you on the phone, right? Not you literally, but they're not going the waiting part. And there's so many systems that are built around waiting. Hey, we'll get back to you about this. Let me check on that. And again, when people say if they wait more than 1 minute, it's stressful to watch a video, do you think that group is going to sit there and wait while all these other things happen? There's a company, I'm sure maybe you guys do this too. There's a company called Credit Key that does instant decisions on credit. They're not the only one, but they're a company that I'm quite familiar with. They can take a credit application that might take 3 or 4 weeks, where you have to fill out the form, fax it in, have a credit department approve it, get back to them with an allocate, whatever. 3 to 4 weeks to 1 minute. And guess what they found is that people would walk away because it said, hey, we can extend you credit. Great. Fill out this form, fax it in, we'll send you a decision by mail 3 weeks from now. Forget it. And that's people our age. Imagine what younger people are going to do. They're going to be like, what's a fax machine? So that's the part I worry about the most, is being out of line with the expectations of buyers, in particular speed.
Thank you.
Other questions? There's a question. Yes.
Good morning. John Sullivan from Total Industries. If you were in our shoes as dealers, as dealer leaders selling services and supporting material handling equipment, where would you focus our efforts?
Wow. Well, I encourage companies to think about this, and nobody ever does it. So I'm going to say that off the top. But if you really want to be ahead of the curve, take some time off, go to an offsite with your team, and think a little bit about where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years with your customers. Just evaluate who are your current customers, how do they research, buy, service, and then talk to them too. Hey, what are we doing well? What would you like us to improve? Forget about the technologies, forget all that stuff. Just kind of a wish list, like what would you like us to do better? And not the standard, hey, how are we doing this year? Good, better, bad. Scale 1 to 5. That doesn't answer anything. Really have in-depth interviews with your customers and say, how can we use new technologies, new way of thinking to make you more productive? I assure you, you will be surprised by some of the things you hear. And some of those things will turn into real programs that you'll implement that will put you ahead of other people. But I just think spending quality time with your customers, even in an offsite environment, getting from them what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and what you could be doing better. First of all, nobody hates doing that. I've done many of these in my professional life. Nobody says, no, I don't want to talk to you. Yeah, I buy stuff from you, but pound sand. Nobody says that. They said, sure, especially if you go to them. But that's the part I would do, is because everybody's industry is a little bit different, and your relationship with your customers and what you sell and how you sell it is different. But I guess the bottom line is, don't assume what's worked in the past is going to work in the future. And if that's the case, then think about where you want to be in 3 to 5 years. Plan for that future, and then work your way back to the present. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name's Katina. I work for Toyota Material Handling in the Digital Solutions Department. One of my questions is, in this industry, we see a large number of customers who are digitalizing their RFQ process by creating portals of their own. Do you know or have any recommendations of tools that can interact within company portals?
Wow, that's a great question, because I could go on for days about it. I want to bring out one thing that you said that I think is the most important part. Your customers are digitizing their processes. This I've heard many, many times. This is no joke. I've heard companies say, when I asked them, why did you guys do B2B e-commerce? They said, because our customers threatened to leave unless we did it, because somebody else was doing it. And it was so much easier and so much more convenient. They said, we've already made of our processes work. We have hired people who know how to make that work. We use their website exclusively. And if you want, it's so successful for us that if you want us to be your customer, you have to do this too. I'm like, wow. That's a company that's a bit lost in itself. But the point is, if your customers are doing this, then you really do need to get on board with it. There are a ton of different tools. I tend to be more of a B2B commerce guy as opposed to a portal guy. And so the difference is a portal is like an ordering mechanism. And I don't think that's e-commerce myself. E-commerce is an experience where you go there, it knows who you are, it makes recommendations, it has your order history, it's graphical, et cetera. I don't mean to characterize it this way, but I've seen portals before, which are like, username and password, log in, and it says, okay, here are a couple orders you might be interested in. I don't think that's as interesting. I'm not saying you have to have a 360-degree view of things, but I would encourage you to think more about e-commerce and less about kind of a portal. Again, I'm not sure that's what you meant by that, but I have seen ordering portals that are just not compelling for people, especially younger generations who are used to seeing things that are more sophisticated than that. Other questions? I think we've got like 5 minutes left. Okay, Nick's got. You want to come up on stage, by the way, since I think you're going to say a few words? Okay.
Mic on? Yeah, I know in our industry and most industries we see like e-procurement systems, and a lot of times it feels like we have to play ball because the customer wants to order through e-procurement. Do you have any good strategies or any tips on, is that the way you go, or do you try and fight against that and have the customer come to your own site? I think the experience you can provide on your own site obviously has its advantages, but I think sometimes when you have Coupas or the Ariba's, or in our industry, there's a Smart Equip as an e-procurement tool. Like, how do you typically play nice with those?
I think it's highly circumstantial, but if your customer already has an e-procurement system, or they use EDI, then it's going to be hard to change their behavior. Despite all the things I said, when you get locked into a system like that, it becomes very comfortable and easy and predictable. And Coupa, for example, is pretty impressive because they started out as a purely web-based technology. I knew those guys way back in the day, and I'm like, so we're gonna revolutionize the e-procurement market. I'm like, good luck with that. But they did. They really did, and they changed the way people thought about it. So they're not all the same. Like EDI is maybe on this end of the spectrum, and then I'd put cutting edge e-commerce on this end of the spectrum. E-procurement somewhere in the middle. But when I talk to the guys like Grainger and Fastenal, they are heavily invested in the e-procurement side of the business. They have whole teams that do this stuff.
Yep.
So I guess the answer is it depends on what your customer wants. If they're really locked into a process, then the burn on that's going to be much longer. I say get them over to e-commerce, because the other question is how long are they going to be continuing to do the e-procurement EDI thing? Younger generations don't want to look at green screens with a blinking thing. They're used to buying stuff, adding to cart on Amazon.
Yep.
So it's trending that way toward e-commerce, but I think you got to kind of go with whatever your customers are doing right now, but I'd have a parallel path. I'd say, look, this is for the next 5 years, but in parallel, we're going to start migrating these customers over to e-commerce. Because, again, e-commerce is an experience. E-procurement is an ordering platform.
Sure. Good. So, any other questions for Andy? I know we've talked about this on the Toyota side for several years, but I think Andy's got a lot of good insights on what other companies are doing, what some of the secrets to success are.
Yeah, and so just in conclusion here, just wanted to say, Nick mentioned this at the beginning. We do have this podcast that I do with my partner, with Master B2B. That's not really us. These are cartoons of us. And we cover a topic for 15 minutes. It's very easy to listen to. We make it fun and entertaining. So it's every Friday. Wherever you get your podcast, called the Friday 15. And the last thing is, I mentioned this community, and you mentioned it too. Anybody who's interested in joining that, you can go to masterb2b.com. Upper right-hand corner, it says form sign up. and you can apply to join. We like to review who's coming in, but if you're interested in this kind of stuff and you want to hear from other people who are struggling with the same things you are, it's a great place to go.
Yep. Yeah, I'll endorse that as well. I mean, I use it from time to time to try and understand problems that other people may have solved. I think socializing that is an easy way to not make the same mistakes as some other companies and learn from them. So yeah, I highly encourage you to take a look at it. It's a really good group of people.
Sounds good. Well,
All right.
Thanks for
a lot,
having me.
Andy.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Hey.